Okay. Firework group meeting today. I think this is our content closure meeting, to be honest. So this is where we get any content that is coming into the next ballot that is gonna happen. So I'm just gonna run through the agenda. Um, I will be chairing for the moment, and when Jane joins us, I will hand over chairing to Jane. We've got Brett as scribe. So let's just run through the agenda of what we're thinking we're going to do today. So there are still meeting minute approvals that have been held over to this one. We've got some updates and news running through things. And then we thought in this kind of order, and I'll just check that with everybody if we need to shift things around as to whether or not you're available. We thought we'd start off with Angus, who's got 20 minutes for two jurors. Angus, that's ambitious. Maybe pick the one that you really want.
Yeah, I put the 20 minutes on, so that's a bit
Yeah.
arbitrary. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll try it.
all right.
I can compact myself like
Then
Claude.
There's a patient summary release approval, like a project report out. We won't need 20 minutes. That's probably max 15 that I'll just do a run through of, and I'm going to sub in for Michael Wilson. Um, then we're going to go over to Uday. We've got AFMM1 discussions to go through, and actually, Brett, is that the limit of the AFMM1 we need to do?
Yeah, because that's the only those endpoint artifacts, which includes the terminology artifacts, are all at
Mm,
0 at the moment. So we've got till next time, so 2 weeks to
yeah.
do the FMM approval. But it might be a good chance to just to consider that
Now
and
you
put it
said
to the
next
group.
week. We
Yeah,
don't have a meeting next week because we meet
the week
fortnightly.
after,
Is
week
that
after.
still okay so that's still fine for
Yeah,
ballot. So
that's still
we
fine
could,
for
if
ballot.
we're
Yeah.
having content discussions, we could bump the AFMM1 to like the next call if we
Next
need to.
call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
All right.
Yeah. The draft material's up now, so fully.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's there's a PR with it in, but I think it's
Okay.
more, are there any more decisions to make? Make sure we haven't got any more to do.
Which is a fantastic segue.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
are there
So
any
when you say
items
it's
we're
up,
missing on
is it
this
in AU
agenda that we
Base?
need to be getting through? Sorry, I think I just spoke over someone. Was that you, Richard?
Richard? Yeah.
When you say it's up, is it in the CI build of AU Base?
I
No,
cannot
it's
hear
in a
you.
branch. It's in a branch.
What is this?
there's a PR for AU base,
Then we can't
endpoint.
AFMM on it.
Oh
It's
well,
not
can we
master.
maybe
So we will
Mm.
bump that
approve the
then. Thank you. This will move
yeah.
to the next call.
Well, can we approve to at least get it in as a draft then?
We already have approved getting them in as a draft. That was what
Okay,
all the
cool.
Mm.
previous work groups ones were.
All right. So
Yeah,
this will be a flag that's going to be in the CI build shortly.
Yeah.
Can people
sure.
have a look at it? Yep.
Yeah, and we'll get enough time to resolve
Yeah.
those some of the QRs as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
yeah, that's good. All right.
And that will
So that's
be
going to be
the
short.
major focus of the next meeting is really just closing out those governance things. So there would be a lot of time to go through
Mm.
AFM1 if necessary or
Cool.
any of the other requirements.
Yeah,
All right.
cool.
Now, does anyone need me to shift the order of this around? And I will also note we don't have the medication items from Heath. Are we supposed to?
Is he here?
Heath is not on the line, but we had been talking about, but had not yet actually come to a vote on any of the medication items. Is that I is that an expectation from people? And oh, look, Jane is on the
I
line. I can
believe,
call the hand over.
I
Woohoo!
believe, so I believed he was doing some direct consultation. He wanted to catch up with a couple of vendors who already have
hmm
some meds in to validate some stuff. So I think he's okay at the moment if it's not on the agenda.
Well, if it's not in now, it won't get into ballot, basically.
No, so I think he's recessed and
hmm
approached it, um, taking on Andy's feedback from last time around. Maybe we need to look at the intent stuff.
hmm
So rather as a reflex. So I think that's what he's looking at.
Okay, that sounds good. Maybe I need to confirm and just
Yeah,
check with Andy then, because one of the ideas is there could be a breakout at the upcoming Connectathon in Brisbane
that's the
to,
plan.
okay,
So I
cool.
think he's actually planning to have a track for Meds List. So that might help as well. But just double check with Heath.
Right. Could we then, Brett, record an action item for Heath, and I will say myself and Andy, but in this case, Andy wearing the hat as the HL7AU person responsible for connectathons, to just confirm the arrangements for the upcoming connectathon, that we have this in place. Yeah.
That's good.
All
Will
right,
do.
great. So at this point, having run through the agenda, I'm going to hand over to Jane. Jane, you're good to take over?
Thanks, Danielle. Yes. Sorry.
Shall I stop sharing and you
Yes.
can? All right.
Yep, I can. Bring it up. Okay. So we've run through the agenda. Wonderful. All right. So our first agenda item then is to approve our minutes from previous meetings. So we do have two lots of meeting minutes to go through. Has everyone had a look at those? Do I need to bring them up? Is there any questions or comments?
Could you just bring each one up on screen and just do just a quick skim through?
Yep. Okay, so this one was our 17th, which is our last actual meeting, where we went through our new identifiers, our AFMM endorsement, project scope statements, notice of intent to ballot for AU Base and AU Core, endpoint terminology, connection and payload type, section gender, which was then carried over to the next meeting that we spoke about. We went over time. We did not get to family member history, and medication was moved to the next meeting as well. So any concerns on that one? Hearing none, I will go back to the second,
Could
which
I
was
have
last.
permission to make
Yep.
a slight correction? In the action, it refers to Richard, myself, and Lloyd doing something around the identifiers. I don't think we planned Richard to involve Lloyd. I don't know why we would need to involve Lloyd for the HL7AU test data repository. I think that's a mistype.
That's a mistype. A block report. I'll go fix it.
Cool.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, then I'm okay with this as long as I get to make the editorial collection correction, sorry, on the action.
Missed that one. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. So the 24, sorry, that was our out of think. That was, no, yes, 24th, last week.
Yeah, that's our extra one. Yep.
This is our extra one. Yep. Okay. So how minutes? So we went through our endpoint terminology, value sets and bindings, drain endpoint payload types, service interface. Then there was lots of discussion on medication request, which we have then decided that we would move, as we've just spoken about, move that to a separate workshop. There was discussion around the Jackson Junior value set governance, which we would deferring that to pending further resolution of ownership and governance. And our HSPO and HAE identifies a FMM1 promotion. And family member history was once again deferred. I think you've now taken that off the agenda for this meeting. Does anybody have any concerns about those? No. Okay. Do we want to, can I get somebody to move? Do we want to do them separately, or are we happy to do them as a
I'm
group?
happy to do them together
Can
unless
we
anyone actually wants to discuss them separately, which is fine.
Can we do them
Noting the permission
separately?
for the, yeah, separately? Okay.
Yeah, I just can't. I have
Yep.
to abstain on one and can approve the other. So
Ah.
That's fine.
So noting the editorial correction, I'm happy to motion approval of the minutes of the 17th of June.
I'll second Marika.
Marika. Uh,
Want a
Danielle,
poll?
are you able to
I
do
can
a
do it. I
poll
can do
or
it.
Brett? Yep. Wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
let's do it. We've got 17 altogether, so let's give it a second more. We're nearly there. I'm going to go to countdown. Oh no, I think we are there. Okay, let me end the poll. So we've got 15 affirmative, 0 negative, and 3 abstentions.
Plus yours in the, or had you
Yeah,
already
I
counted?
counted that.
Yep.
Yeah, I counted that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Passed. Okay. So our second set of meeting minutes from the 24th of the 6th are out of cycle. Can I get somebody to motion?
I can
I'll move
motion
that.
that.
Clear out Landon and Michael.
Thank
I
you.
can motion. Michael can second. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And we'll bring up a poll. Thanks, Brett.
Yep. We through. Nice there. I reckon one more. I'll give you 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll. So we have 14, no, sorry, 10 affirmative, 0 negative, and 4 abstentions.
Okay. Thank you. Passed. All right. So we'll move on to our second item on the agenda, which I will hand over to you, Brett.
All right, yeah, just confirming, I have a couple of things. So yes, this is our last chance for any decisions to be made to be included for the ballot. And next meeting is the last chance for FMM1 decisions to be made. So yeah, if your thing is at 0, you need to get the FMM1s in. I think I don't even know what I'm aware of his endpoint. There's some jurors there which are going to be handled through ballot. So yeah, I think those will probably be voted on through ballot and we'll handle them that way. The other thing to note is today is the opening of the ballot sign up. So some comms will come out today, and there's the form to fill in as per usual. So we've got a month of ballot sign ups coming up towards the ballot. That's about it.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Brett. Okay. Third on the agenda, we have Angus, who has something to talk to us about AU Base pathology report items.
Yeah.
Do you want to share, Angus, or do you want me to bring them up? Or?
Yeah, let me share. Share. So that you can request multiple presenters sharing. To request to share, do I? Share. Oh, no, it's working now. There's one. All right, can you see Jira? See the AU pathology report incorrect binding?
Yep.
Yeah,
I'll
but
start with
it's
this one.
tiny. Zoom in
It's
at
very
least
small.
twice.
Yeah,
You have a big screen. I really
I have
don't.
big,
Okay, that's
screen.
perfect. Thank you.
Yep. So I think this one's pretty quick. So this is AU Base. So maybe if I just go to AU Base, don't look at our course profile. The AU Base pathology report code. Is it what I was saying? No, sorry, this one's going to be quick. AU-based pathology for incorrect code binding on code. So the code property has a preferred binding to SPHIR reporting, right? And it should be requesting, yes. So here, this binding here, so this is diagnostic report, and the code binding is pointing to the reporting value set, not the requesting value set. But this is the code of the report coming back. So if you order a full blood count, you get back a full blood count, which is the ordering set. This value set is meant to live on the results. So if I go to the result and open that up in a tab, so this is correct. So this is a pathology result, which is an observation, and its code is bound to the same thing, but it's correct here, right? This is reporting. These are OBX codes. These are primarily the LOINC codes, right? But back on the diagnostic report code, you don't report LOINC like here. You report SNOMED here, which is akin to the service request. So if we go to e-requesting and look at their service request, and they talk about it here, but the binding for code here, this is the value set that should be bound on the diagnostic report. I think it's an easy error that someone made earlier on because they think, oh, this is a report, so surely it's the reporting, but this is the code, the response to your order, right? So this is the order code, and it's the observations that have the reporting. So that's basically the issue, and it's been confirmed with the RCPA. I think I wrote here, the RCPA reporting terminology primary code is incorrect. I've met with David Willock, Vanessa Cameron from the RCPA on this matter, and they all agree that the current binding is incorrect. About it, I've got on this one. Go, Daniel.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought Richard was first. Richard's put his hand down.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
so I have no skin in this game. I'm feeling nervous about this change and how we handle it for a couple of reasons. This particular binding, wrong, right? I'm like I'm not the SME, you are. Had a whole big presentation from the agency out to a bunch of different path labs, and then it got put into AU Base, and then it got balloted, and it's also what's actually bound in the My Health Record CDA docs for like default to share. So I'm nervous, I suppose, about the change and whether or not I feel like I could agree to that because I mean I agree I'm not the SME. So I just wanted to raise that. I'm just feeling uncomfortable, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how more to appease you. I'm very confident it's wrong. Like I said, I double checked my confidence and had a meeting with the RCPA, and they know Vanessa Cameron especially knows this terminology very well. She agreed with me.
Then do we have David McKillop on the line?
David's here.
We do.
we do,
And
yeah.
anyone else from the agency? Is this is the spec bound in your CDA default to share requirements for My Health Record, right? Like this is the value set. And if we change it here, like how does that follow through? Like I guess I just want to like talk that through so that I can feel more comfortable about it.
Yeah, good question.
Do you want to get a Brett while David thinks? Brett's had his hand up.
Oh, I just had a query. Like in that value set, that doesn't include any panel codes at all, or does it?
Yeah. So this value set, the reporting one.
Yeah.
Click on it. Does it show you much? Probably not. You have to do the stance like this and like this, which seems absolutely crazy to me, but Michael taught me that trick. So I don't know if this is going to help us much, but these are the LOINC codes. So there would be no panel codes in here. There would be no full blood count in here. There'd be no liver function in here because it's not a observation, right? So we don't use LOINC for those things. And yet when we're talking about diagnostic report code, this is the thing coming back to you, right? Like it's a full blood count. It's a liver functions test. It's effectively echoing back what you ordered. You ordered a full blood count. Here is your full blood count. And the code should say full blood count, and then the observations are the things that should be bound and are bound to that, which would be hemoglobin,
So
white cells, platelets, which would be all the low-end codes.
yeah, so where are all the panels defined?
So if I
In
go,
SNOMED.
I can't answer that question. They've defined in a value set published by the RCPA called requesting pathology. My SNOMED skills aren't good enough to tell you where it's defined in
Oh, no,
SNOMED.
that's right. So that's the
I can show
preferred
you. This is it here.
panel.
So this is the one that should be
Yeah,
bound because this is e-requesting, right? Service request.
yeah.
This is what you're ordering. So if we look at this one,
So that's where your full blood count
yeah, and I
term
probably
is.
won't
Yeah,
probably
okay.
won't find it with this beautiful UI, but in here would be, these are all the things you're ordering, and
Specific.
somewhere
Yeah,
in here
yeah.
will be full blood count, right? And these are SNOMED. Richard.
So diagnostic report code doesn't encode what I'm sending you. It encodes what you asked for. Is that right?
It 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 encodes, yeah, so it encodes what we've done. So in response to what you asked. So you asked for apples. Hopefully we give you back apples. We might not, but even if we don't give you back apples, we're still going to use a code into what you ordered. Like there's the codes you order. Think of it as
So diagnostic report code. The idea what you're saying is that diagnostic report code is the code of a request, not the code of a response.
it is the code of a response in diagnostic report. It's the grouper, it's the panel code, right? It's not the itty bitty result code, which is what this value set is. This is the itty bitty result value set, not the panel. Now when we order, we also order people when people order a liver function test, they don't order all the itty bitty things. They order a liver functions test, and then the lab goes, "You want a liver function test?" And then they do all the testing, and they return to you a liver function test, diagnosticreport.code liver function, and attached to it is a list of observations, which are the reporting value sets. ASD, ALT, all the itty bitty results. This is the itty bitty result value set, not the panel value set, and that's why it's mapped to the wrong thing.
Thank you for that clarification. On that clarification, it begins to make sense. Before, I wasn't quite so clear. Thank you.
How'd you go, David? He's madly looking it up.
Yeah, I was looking at. Sorry, I agree with that. That the requesting is a better fit for diagnostic report. I'm just having a look at Udo had it up on his screen. I was quizzing over there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what more I can do. I can drag the RCPA people in here if you'd like. Not now.
No, it's more. I agree with what for the change. It's a better fit and things.
Yeah.
I have to have a
ramifications of what's that change mean to you?
Yeah, that's my concern. I'm not disputing that you have identified what is a much more appropriate change. I'm just trying to think about how we change management this one, especially with the implications into the bindings, into the default to share MHR specs. So, there's a thing here, and about that.
I guess, David, when it comes to my health record, your newer spec that does atomic data, it would use this value set, but your legacy, or I don't know if I show you legacy, your older one, the one that didn't collect atomic pathology.
No, it uses this.
It uses this?
Yeah, I did that. Blame me. Because at the time, and we did have the discussion, and I'm not saying it was correct, but at the time when we created the one that is like most of the metadata going up to the
metadata with a PDF, just metadata in a PDF.
Yep, based on our like DCMs. You remember DCMs?
Yeah.
What else does? Yeah, that's what is bound to this. Like all the reporting stuff, all of it is this one, which is just my change management worry. Like it's just all the way through.
I'd be very surprised not to call you foul, but I'd be very surprised if that's true. I spent a lot of time with that spec as well, and I've never stuck in my mind that we had the binding wrong, and it would be the only binding, right? It'd be because you would bind to one of these value sets, not both of them, because it was just metadata, right? You just got the report name. So if you're right that I did a good 4 or 5 years and all I ever did was pathology, the agency, and I never noticed, which I find struggling with.
Well, I mean, you probably
Maybe I had a
tried
bloke's look. Maybe I had a
things
bloke's
with
look for 6 years.
pathology, and we can't really say that. Anyway, um,
I'll go after this. I'll go look up the spec, but
and multiple versions of it because we do have multiple versions of both
And
specifications and the DCMs. The
Mm.
original DCMs didn't, and then there was this great revelation of RCPA coming out with what would be a reporting terminology, and we just went, let's use it everywhere that's reporting,
Mm.
and included it.
maybe that's how this got wrong because
I
it
think
just
that's how this
aligned.
got
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
I remember David McKillop and I, when we first tried to do this in FHIR, I think, David, you might remember, we did a presentation to a whole bunch of people all about like this early thing. This is like 5 years ago, I
Yeah.
think, and walked through it. This binding was in it. It doesn't mean that that was actually like the right thing because there were so many things that we were working through in FHIR at the time.
Yeah.
So I can easily see how this slipped through the cracks.
Well, what should we do? Should we do a, a, action on David to work out what they did at the RC at My Health Record and come back about the ramifications?
can I make a suggestion
Yep.
that we raise it in ballot so that we can actually have time to do a resolution? If we're going to have to defer it anyway because we haven't obviously got time. This is our last meeting to get it in before.
Yep.
That is
I'm
actually
with
a way
you.
to do it. We could, this is the kind of level of issue that we could actually easily address during the ballot resolution period. Like we could actually do it that way. Yeah. Yeah.
And the reality is, there's not many people or laboratories are using terminology. It's just in-house house codes, and it's pretty much what's in the My Health Records a bit of a mess, really.
New South Wales pathology is the only one I know that actually uses this value set appropriately,
Yeah.
as I believe you should be using it.
Yeah, they're the only ones, but the rest of it is just
Yeah, the rest
rough.
don't. They just haven't done the
It's
work.
just yeah. It's,
Agree. But if we're creating AU Base and building the platform for the future, then
sure.
like
No, I
it
agree
right.
with it. You're at the right, you're changing it to the right terminology set. I'm just not. I just
Yeah.
need to figure out what
Okay.
the
So-
as Danielle said, so we can get back to that in the ballot.
Okay, thank you.
There's-
So from a process perspective, Brett, and maybe that's why you have your hand up, because we already have the GRR, how do we manage this during the ballot process?
Vote on it. Yeah. I mean, the theory can still continue. It's just it'll get some votes on it during the ballot process, and we'll do it in reconciliation. I just want to ask too, can someone look at these, like look at the SPIA set there, because like here's a term that's a panel that's in that set, and I don't understand why, that's just eyeballing it for 5 minutes. It's so if there's panels in there, I don't like that is a thing you could use there. So I think we need some clarity about some of the content as well, because it's is that a mistake or is
So I'm not getting what you're getting at. So you're saying you said that you looked at something. I'm looking in chat.
yeah,
I'm not drawing the
you
link.
can see the link. You see the link code, gas panel.
Gas panel. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you could use that term in that slot there because it's just a diagnostic report on a gas panel with the results in it.
So there's like thousands of Laurent codes in there. I'm sure there's, just because it says panel, I can't.
It is
I'm
a
not going to
panel.
tell you what. Yeah.
I looked it up. So yeah, like is it
Well-
like because I think this is like making choices, I guess, on representations
Like
as well.
I guess what I'm going to say, I'm not
yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and nitpick at each code and explain each one. If you want like information, I suspect we can bring the RCPA in. Because to point at one code and go, oh, this code is that, like, well, maybe that code shouldn't be there, right? Like, I'm not
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, I just think I want to make sure that the spear stuff
Yeah.
is doing what it's supposed to do. Or is this
Oh,
like how is
that's
this saying
questionable, but
is it yeah? Because the thing is like if should this be an observation with components, right? I don't know, right? It's this is part of the implementation questions. Like it's I think
So if
this
we're
is the kind
doing,
of thing practically people
so
could
could.
we
we
do this
I
at
understand
like,
your point, and I think it's fair. Yeah.
because can we manage the change management that I'm concerned about while like really informing all of the other players, some of whom are path labs who know what they're doing, but then there's all the people who consume that who might be all like, well, hang on, what? I'm not sure. And could we manage that as a breakout in the Brisbane Connectathon, like get together and just go like, here it is, let's just like actually work through it?
Sure.
yeah, yeah. Look, I can even show you like the RCPA's what do they call them? The exemplar reports here. See these exemplar reports, which you'll have to trust me, are copies of the RCPA exemplar reports. So this is an exemplar report in V2 and OBR4, which is diagnosticreport.code. Here is SNOMED serum iron test, right? Not ferritin Loic. There's this clear thing that Loic is what we use for. We often say we use Loic for resulting and SNOMED for ordering. OBR4 is us telling what you ordered. You ordered an iron test, you ordered a SNOMED iron test, and here are your results, all in Loic, right? I know that Loic can have panel codes, Brett. In America, they don't use SNOMED for ordering, they use Loic, and therefore Loic has panel codes in it. Have some of
Yeah.
those panel codes crept into the spear set? I'm sure they have, and gas panel's probably one of them.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but
So I think this is good. I mean, your explanation is good. Like, I understand. Yeah, that's
yeah.
it's wrong,
So
but it's
so I'm happy
but
that we
yeah, yeah,
we kick this down like David does his work, and then I don't know, yeah, I'm in no rush. So take it to ballot, and then I can razzle up RCPA people to vote on it.
Oh, sounds good.
Yeah, we
yeah,
get like
yeah. Sounds good.
Oracle and Epic to confirm,
Yeah,
and
Yep.
obviously we bring in a bunch of the other path labs, and everyone gets in
Yeah.
the room, and we also have hopefully the consuming systems who consume these diagnostic reports and then need to do things with them, and we all get in a room and go, wow, it turns out it is really obvious, and we can also get like the response from the agency around that, and we've got like this really solid pathway forwards.
Yeah, I just occurred to me, does the ADRM standard point do it and say it right? Maybe or check
no
this.
committee to fix it.
But I'm wondering whether they got it right in the first place, or if they even
Yeah,
if
yeah,
they
yeah.
even say,
Say anything.
God, this site's so low, slow to load. Or OBR4. No, they just say the RCPA board
Yeah,
approved requesting terminology reference set. So that's what I'm
It's
saying.
pretty clear.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
So that's
yeah.
my
So
point. Yeah.
even just as a V2 mapping thing, it should
Yeah.
reflect that. Yeah,
Yeah. Yep. And so here,
yeah.
liver function test. You see this SNOMED test.
Yeah. So yeah, so like I think like I would yeah, like I think this is good and we should have a discussion and that's great. The I think too we got to look at the spear set and maybe look at for these issues with panels being there or what do they mean in in that resulting set. Is that something you can do? It's yeah, it's because if that's an observation with components, I go, that's fine. That's just you know,
It's an
we can do
observation. We
that.
can put. So you haven't been in
Yeah.
the AU core meetings about diagnostic report. We've already voted that the panels go in
Yeah.
diagnosticreport.code, not in observation.code.
Sure. So you'd want to say there was a gas panel, you'd have a gas panel SNOMED code in the diagnostic report
And then
code,
use the
and
lowing
then you use the
parts of that
individual
panel.
parts.
Interesting.
Yeah.
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 So there
So
was a
yeah,
view
cool.
held before that you would have a diagnostic report that said, I don't know, pathology in the code, and then it would
Oh,
have
yeah.
a result observation, which would be what we were calling like a panel observation. And that observation would use the reporting stuff again and say this is a full blood count. And then that observation has members of another set of observation, which were the results, right? But Dave and I have spent the last 2 years at international and then in the Australian AU core debunking that approach and we put the report code, liver full blood count in diagnosticriport.code, and then the results are the results for the full blood count. And if you need two panels, then that's another diagnostic report.
Cool.
Okay.
Michael
Sorry.
Osborne's made an interesting observation, so I happen to pluck out one of the few.
Right.
Yeah.
Just note that.
Sorry, I'm going to have to cut you
Yeah,
short.
yep,
We have
good.
decided
Yep.
to defer.
Yes, excellent. So I've probably run out of time for my second one.
Is it going to take long?
Yes.
Okay.
I reckon we might get back to it anyway, because I'm not sure how much
Okay.
other things
We'll
we
come.
need to do.
Okay. If we've got time, we'll come back to you, Angus.
Yep. No worries.
All right.
Stop share.
Thank you. Okay. I'll reshare. Okay. So next is Michael Wilson with our
Yes, I
AUBS.
am Michael Wilson.
Yeah, Danielle's running it from she felt it. So
Not another Michael.
That's right. We have yet another Michael. Let me just get to the screen share option. Can you stop sharing screen?
Yep.
Perfect. All right, let me find the button. Here it is, the button. Okie dokie. So this is final report out publication, AU patient summary. And I am thrilled that we're actually doing this, and I will say thrilled because yes, it's been a long journey, but also, as you do, at very last moments, there were all sorts of like sort of publication shenanigans, and the international package wasn't right, and then they republished it, and then that wasn't right, and then Graham has done some emergency saves. But we're here. Everything is lining up. So that's great. So I'm going to do the run through of the current process that we do for report out, on the understanding also that while we might do report outs in future, the kind of approval would sit with the TSC. The Australian TSC meets tomorrow. I'll run through this again as an informative thing for them, but at the moment, because we don't have the full publication approval form and process from TSC, we're doing like current operation. Here's what we're going to run through. Just your usual, like, what is this project? What have we done? How did we go about it? And where are we up to in the governance? And looking for this group to uh, raise any objections or any concerns or actions that we might need to address before we're comfortable that we can publish. I will say that our work group has approved publication of this. They're happy with it. It was conditional approval, and I'll run through that very shortly. But so FHIR Implementation Guide project. This is straight from the project proposal that's been approved. This is straight from the project scope that was approved. It was just a baseline foundation for Australia to build off of that allows us to localize some of the Australian requirements to work through what are our local kind of like clinical workflows while ensuring that anything that is an Australian patient summary can also work like an international patient summary when it's outside of Australia's borders. The dependencies are relatively extensive if I kept them up to date. Oh, good for me. I didn't even bother to version extension pack. Well done. So we're off FHIR, its latest THO, its latest extension pack, which is 530. The previous things we've approved for like AU Core and Base are 520, but we're on to 530 now. We're against AU CDI R2. While AU CDI R3 got published last week, that is not the dependency for this release. We're against the latest base and core that are published, which is AU Base 6, AU Core 2, and the latest IPS, which is 201. And of course, there's a bunch of NCTS managed HL7AU terminology. All of those come from AU Base. And then unversioned, so there's no canonical pinning that comes through into the specification. There's no local value sets defined in patient summary, nor are there any from core that we inherit. So it's all picking up like base. All right, so where are we? Well, look, frankly, we're at the end, which is great. Everybody's done a fantastic job. Um, Hopefully at the end of this meeting, everyone is comfortable that we publish, and if not, I maybe go for conditional approval if there are any steps that people really think that we want to go through. So, here's what we need to have done. We need to have, from a governance perspective, and by we, I mean here from the project perspective, we need to have a project proposal approved. We have that. We need a PSS approved. We have that. It's also in the HL7AU project registry that's documented that this was also endorsed by the board. We've had our NIB, Notice of Intent to Ballot for Working Standard, approved. That was when that happened. All the AFMM has been approved. There are multiple jurors that have been brought through this group, where the work group from AU Core has endorsed up to AFMM2 and then had that brought through this group to endorse, and all of that's happened. Um, our variance statement has been approved. We've actually not changed it since this point in time. If anyone wants to look at it, I'm happy to show you it again. But the variance has stayed the same. The majority of the work actually through AU Patient Summary has actually been informative, like having examples or having better explanations of must support, rather than anything that triggers a variance statement, which is really around like profiles and extensions. Then we have the QA.html, which I'm about to go through for this group, because while the work group gets to approve that, we need the FHIR work group. So the AU core work group gets to approve it, but we need the FHIR work group to endorse that content. I just wanted to do before we get to that, really quick scope. Massive amounts of work done, really well done from the group as well. We've hit AFMM2 across the board, so that's been great. There's been a significant amount of testing that's happened locally and internationally. Um, and there's an Inferno that's also like backing that up and a whole bunch of test data. So I'm probably going to skip past this slide. This is a bit boring. This is just like work group, lots of members. Um, So the activities we've done, this is a little bit different to the other ones, the other projects we've run in HL7 Australia before. We've had both 40-minute, fortnightly 90-minute online calls, but there has been fortnightly calls with IPS as a number of items that have been raised both locally and internationally are being solved at the international level. And so that's a really regular thing where any of those kind of like normative things around how does must support work are actually being handled at the international level. Um, we've had our quarterly face-to-face meetings. We did have Conformance Fridays for a while because must support is, as always, something that is something that takes time, I'll say, but that's happened. We have a whole video series there. We've been to all the HL7AU connectathons. We went to the HL7 International Connectathon in Rotterdam, which was incredibly encouraging in the sense that we were able to confirm that the Australian patient summary outside of Australia's borders, as in systems that are set up to do IPS or US PCS or Canada PS, can actually read it like it's an IPS document. So that was fantastic. We've only had one sparked face-to-face testing event, and we've done from a ballot perspective, both for comment and for working standard, and we have full ballot resolution of those things. So the FCP's been, I think, a bit intense actually for this one. I guess that's just a graphical multiple e-votes, Zoom calls, etc. I won't do that to death. In terms of publication history, which is really just showing, I think, our testing history, each of these different snapshots shows where we went and tested, and we tried to almost do a test first, like let's test as much as possible and all the time. And I think that's actually worked out really quite well. Um, so that's our previous kind of content going over like the last 18 months. Uh, Ballot for comment. Right. This was showing we got 58 respondents, noting that actually not everybody actually voted. Um, so there were 58 that were eligible. The majority of people did, which was 82%. And at the time, it was quite positive, and we also picked up some normative content, which is great, which is different in coming into working standard. Um, we had 57 respondents, and this was the first time we trialed in Australia like a February, March ballot. So we still got 57, which was great. The percentage voted was a little bit lower. Um, and what was really interesting to me was that I think there was really only two normative issues. Everything else was talking about providing examples or some more clarification or really trying to support people in connection to like, what does this really mean, especially both locally and how does that interface with international? Um, so it was an interesting ballot response from my perspective that it was so heavily tilted towards informative content. All right, I want to run through this QA and then I'm going to motion to accept this. Do I even need to? Actually, sorry, point of order. I don't know that I have run through. Oh no, actually I have the errors and warnings in the past with the firework group. Can Because we did that for AFMM1 and endorsement for that. Um, I think, okay, so I'm just going to do a quick show through the QA.html, but there's nothing new from the time that we went to that we had to go through. So let me just do a quick.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's no. Yeah, we did go through it for the FMM1
Yeah,
discussions,
where's the
and
link?
there's
Let me
nothing
find the
new.
link. I have our release branch,
There's
of
nothing new.
course. Do I have a link on this page to the release branch? No, because that would be much too helpful, wouldn't it? Ugh, really? Okay, well, that was a mistake.
Danielle, I put it in the
Yeah,
chat. I put the
you've got
link
it in
in
the
the chat.
chat.
Hmm.
And Dushi, can you confirm for me whether or not all our QA.html approvals have actually gone through the firework group, or have
Yeah.
they only just
Hmm.
gone through our group?
No, we've done it through Fiverr group as well, and I think we've done it. We've done it as part of the FMM1 approvals, and since then we didn't have any new warnings, and I think some of the errors actually resolved.
They did.
Hmm.
Um, so let me. Oh my God, I cannot get the Zoom bar out of the way. QA, fantastic. Okay, okay. So, running through what we've got, which is, things that got resolved are a bunch of the errors around the examples, which were actually related to the different versioning of extensions packs. But now that the new full release extension pack is out, um, both IPS and AUPS are using the same version, so all those errors just went away. This error has already been cited and approved. Um, from the fire work group as we went into ballot. Um, and I think the rest of it, if we go look at warnings, because we don't care about info, most of it is inherited. Let me just get to warnings. Okay, quick run through. Yeah. Yes, that's standard approved. Inherited from base. So this is actually just inherited from IG. It's already been approved by a fire work group. Yep, yep, yep. Just checking through these quickly. Canonical pinning, we've already got approval around. Uh, we've got approval around best practice. We've got approval around these kinds of, URLs. These are inherited from base. Yep, that's long-standing. We have approval around that. Um, okay, yes, we have approval around this one again, which is the difference between patient summary and IPS. There's this standard tooling thing that keeps cropping up and going away and cropping up and going away, but there's a standard approval around that. Um, and then, okay, so yeah, no, I just wanted to double check. Yeah, we've gone through firework group for those approvals. Fantastic. So, there's nothing new. And in fact, some errors went away. Isn't that fantastic? I haven't updated this slide, and I probably should now that the conditional approval thing no longer applies because um, Graham fixed the IPS package. So we just to clarify, in the last meeting with the AU patient summary project call, we had conditional approval because at the time, the NPM package for IPS 2.0.1 had a little bit of an issue in it where it had not for publication set to true and the URL was wrong, and that needed to be fixed. And so we had conditional approval from the work group that if those are fixed, then we're good to go ahead. Graham has fixed those. So all of those are actually corrected now, which is fantastic. We've tested that out. Um, and so we do have approval from the work group, which means I think we're good to go. So, does anyone have any questions or things we want to run through before I do a call for like concerns or actions related to publishing AU Patient Summary R1? Brian.
Yeah, just a quick question on the process that was done for the negatives, just around the process, not what the negatives were, but just the process.
Okay, so this is from ballot.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so
Because if you
according
flick back a
to
couple of
Algom,
slides, you
yep.
had the number of issues that what was happened with those.
So according to Algom and International, we don't have to resolve them. Now, we went through the process properly, which is to
Yep,
say that every single item has been, like, every single item went through work group
yep,
reconciliation, and the people who voted negative also voted to accept those. What they
yep.
didn't do, though, was withdraw their vote. I don't know if anyone from the agency would like to comment on why they haven't withdrawn their negatives on votes that they voted for.
So they were reconciled, and
Absolutely,
as
100%.
far as
Every
you know,
single
that
item is
was good.
reconciled. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. That was the main question I had. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. I agree. It looks strange. I don't know if there's I don't know, David,
Yeah, it
Richard.
might be. Well,
Yeah. What happened?
yeah, I would say it would hang on, be an agency paperwork processing issue that didn't get it fixed.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a concern that there were negatives, just or even that there are negatives still, just that they were reconciled, and the answer is yes. So thank you.
100%. We can go to.
Yep.
So one of
Yeah,
the things we also have, which I might just put in the chat because I think we actually do this relatively nicely in Australia at the moment. I go to, so let's go firework group. We have a ballot reconciliation area. And so here, and we can pick any one of these things. And we try to keep this as real time as possible so people can also like look at what's happening and what are the votes and how they've been done and link off to all of like the meetings and everything related to them. Um, what I think has happened is there's a
I think that's
uh,
enough info. I don't want to hold things up.
no,
Just making sure that that was done. And yes.
yeah,
no,
100%.
I
Every
just suggest that the agency had different people doing the bulk, because we all got to do it as a group, and it just didn't get sorted appropriately.
Oh,
Yeah,
actually,
we
you don't. I think that might be a misconception. Your voting initially can be bulk, but one of the things that I think happens with withdrawals is that everyone has to log in and do it individually. And I think sometimes that's why some withdrawals for negatives get stuck. So
Yeah,
if we
Yeah.
picked
we'll
you,
care a
David.
lot more. We'll care a lot more in the normative ballot
Yes,
because at the
very
moment
much.
we've got to get to we've
Very
got to
much.
But
get to
yeah,
60
so
for
we
the
can pick a
Yeah.
random
drawings.
one
Yeah,
and like
yeah,
that's been reconciled and we've got links off to the minutes and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, every single one has had a work group reconciliation call and a position that was got voted on by the work group.
Cool. Yeah, didn't want to hold up any further for time
No,
if you were having to move
it's a
and
good
stuff. Yeah,
question. It's a good question.
cool.
Are there any other things that people would like me to go into a bit more detail on, or any questions, or any like concerns that people might have around being okay with the publication of AUPSR1? Okay, so I'm not hearing any. By previous approach, or I guess rather the current one until TSC is up and running, at this point, approval has been left to a formalization through the publication manager, which is Brett, to just confirm through the publication request, which we've got filled out, that gets sent to the publication manager, as long as there are no actions being asked for by the firework group and I guess the governing, like the responsible group, which is AU Core Work Group, has approved it. So from this point, I would present to the Australian TSC tomorrow for info. And if they have no concerns, then the publication manager is free to then conduct their activities to publish this. All right. If we're all good with that, I will stop there. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Very well.
Danielle. Wonderful. Okay, moving on to our next item. I will reshare my agenda screen. We have Uday. You on
Sure.
screen? Did you want me to share? Do you want to
I
share?
can share.
Okay, I'll
Thank
stop
you.
sharing.
All right. Can you see my screen here?
Not yet.
We can see
There.
your camera, but not your screen.
Yeah.
Oops. Sorry. I didn't press the last button. Okay.
Yep.
There you go. All right. Last week, we have Sam from our team has presented the endpoint base changes for the for the value sets and the code systems for connection type and payload type. And we have done a pull request from the motion we have submitted last week, which was approved. We have done a pull request, and Brett thankfully has done some bit more changes to it, with the editorial changes and a few others. So this is the code value set. We have got the motion approved. We've done those changes here. Anybody has any comments, please?
yeah. I think there's still a couple of QA issues. I think too there's some QA issues related to OID allocation.
That's
Because
right.
and I think
Yeah, I think.
process-wise normally we go to FMM1 before we allocate them.
Well, hang on, if we're talking terminology versus structure definitions, because there's an info
Uh,
now, a warning that's out
no,
for like every structure definition that is irrelevant, but that's
yeah,
information.
yeah. Yeah,
If
yeah, there's
we,
actually errors
yeah,
because they need, I think on code systems they're requiring them as it's an error.
no, okay, can we have a look at that then?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, you can sort of see it. Which, yeah, for a ballot we would want to have one, I guess.
Well, yeah, well, once we go to AFMM1 and becomes
Yeah,
ballotable, we would assign
yeah,
an OID at the point at which we have approval. Where is, okay, okay.
yeah, yeah. So that's become, yeah. So it's actually an error now. Yeah, and I mean we will, if we go to FMM1, we'll allocate one anyway. So that would happen.
Yep. So you want to move on, Brett? Next one.
Yeah.
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 Do you want me to show the code system as well, which we have done?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that involved some Europe naming changes and things as well, because that was more in line with the current approaches. Yeah.
Editorial things will need to change there. But yes.
Yeah, that's the code system for the payload type, connection type, sorry. And I'll move on to the next one, the payload type. That's the value set.
Yeah. That there was just noting there was actually a it was a technical change. The R4 value set that was referred to is broken. So instead of referring to that, we actually pulled the code systems that were used from in that R4 value set into this value set. Yeah, so it's an equivalent value set where we've defined the code systems reference directly. Yeah, so that was just to make it usable, really, because it was not validating otherwise.
Well, I realize we agreed on lift and a shift. Okay, there's problems with these codes. They're weird, really weird. Like the 2017-06. Like
Yeah, that's specific code that refers to a specific standard, and that was from the SMD
sure.
project. Yeah.
Apparently on the right it refers to something from 2018.
Yep.
And ns.hl7.org.au. Is that actually registered? Is that like a real namespace?
No, that was the one that was allocated.
By?
Back in the project. The
Okay,
issue with these ones is they are in use. Although we have changed the system, so
no, I guess I'm
we
not
could
saying we
review
changed
them.
them.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
guess I'm probably raising
Yeah.
this is a
Yeah, we
difficult
could deal with
code
that,
system
Bella.
to continue to maintain.
Yeah. I think I want to say there's reference material, but actually I'm not too sure. So yeah, that's a good discussion. I mean the actual system for this code system's changed, so everyone would have to change something anyway. So it's probably a good opportunity to maybe clean that up if you want to do that. This is breaking anyway for the people on the PD project.
It's breaking anyway.
True,
Yeah, it's
but
breaking. It's breaking everywhere.
I mean
Yeah.
the code would be, I assume this is the code that's used in the V2. Like, is this the code that's used in the wrapper, like SOAP or anything?
Um, no, it's
think
not. This was one
Discovery, isn't
allocated.
it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Brian knows more than me. The yeah, this was the format code that was allocated. So I think this was yeah, just what was done at the time, which is now some time ago.
So, if I understand right, then a while ago, this particular code was issued in a different system, so that people currently using it will be using that code, and they'll identify the system differently, either with a different URI or within a word or something else. And so what we're doing here is preserving the code and bringing it into a new system so that implementations that read the code and assume the system will continue to work just the same. Is that
Which
what's
they
going
should
on?
really be doing.
No, I shouldn't. Yeah, yeah. So I think like the
Because
question is whether a change is needed or not. Yeah.
More.
So I mean, if the system,
we'll get it
if
defeatable.
the systems are expected to
Well, I think Ilias will
be explicit about the system, if the software system is
they
expected to be
oh,
explicit
you need
about
to on board
the identification of the code system, then I guess, given that it's breaking, we do have an
All right, mate.
opportunity to
Awesome.
change the
See ya.
codes.
Okay, I'll on from here.
Yeah, Danielle, that yeah, that was just invented at the time.
Well, then
So
it's the work
it's
on
not made.
HL7AU. I think I'm sounding a bit intense here, but I do mean it. If that's actually accepted, then we need to turn that namespace into reality. Like it's actually a known, like accepted namespace, if that's what we're doing. And so I think that's part and parcel of I wasn't I wasn't necessarily trying to say because to change the codes because we agreed in vote to do a lift and shift, but then there are attendant um impacts on HL7AU to actually make that like complete.
Yeah, I'll check that because I think that was an equivalent to the electronic health set, and yeah, there's no static material there
But
to
it's only a
reference.
code, it's not a URI. But I agree with changing it because it's extremely long, and I'm not sure how many systems would actually, I guess if they were storing them, but I don't know if there's a limit in FHIR on how long codes can be. But
There is. I don't
There
remember
is,
off
but
the
it's
top of my
longer than
head, but
that.
there 100%
Yeah,
is.
yeah, that's a good question.
Pretty long.
Yeah, I
Yeah, it
mean
is.
the
It's like
thing is, I guess
126 characters, or maybe it's one of those ones that's like around bit amounts for a string because it's a string data type, so it's as long as you can make a string. But that,
Yeah.
I mean, in practical purposes,
oh
gets very unpleasant.
Yeah.
yeah, but who's reading them?
Yeah,
It's
hits practicalities versus standards.
well,
yeah,
if you're indexing them, Brett, that's the thing. Like in
yeah, sure,
servers and stuff, if you're indexing on codes,
yeah,
that's an issue.
sure,
And certainly if you're a facade, if you're storing them.
yep,
But yeah, it comes down to what the file limit is and whether we're in the limit. But
yeah.
So
That's a good technical question. Yeah,
if it was a system, I would agree with Danielle that it probably would be ideal to register the domain, but at the moment it's just a code. So it's
yeah. The thing is, it's actually a the domain gives us because it's who owns that spec is actually indicated by the domain. So it's like I think we can just have specific codes. That's
and that
no
should be a
problem.
different system.
Yeah, like NS Electronic Health, they're the ones down the bottom. They're the agency defined ones for
I think
MDM
this is a
messages.
problem
It's
because
a
what
new
Yeah.
you've
code
just said
system.
of the code in and of itself is identifying ownership. No, that's really not what codes are for.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sure. It just makes them uniquely namespaced so that like we can give them codes if you want to make a code. Sure.
But I guess what I'm alluding to is that should be a system. Like the prefix part of that should be a system, and then there should be a code. So
Yeah, it could be.
this is a known pattern,
Yeah.
right? To have a value set of URIs, isn't it? Like, is that what you're complaining about?
We're complaining that the code in and of itself includes the full URI basically with a namespace in it.
Yeah. Because
That's
Yeah,
what
we
we're
put it in.
complaining about.
which is a known pattern in FHIR.
No, it's not. I've never seen that in any other code.
Do you want
It's
me to show you? You want me to show
the
you in the spec?
system. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
You
Drop a
want me to
link in the
share?
chat.
I've
I'll
got it
go
on.
have a squeeze.
I've got. So you go look at the definition of URI, and at the bottom it says this data type can be bound to a value set. And then if you go read about that, this is exactly how you do it as per what I'm seeing on screen that you're showing on
So
screen.
sorry, no, the code is a string. The URI is the field on the left.
No, so you scroll
And
up on
what?
your screen. Like I understand the code. The
Yeah,
left is the system, and the right is the code.
Yes.
But when you do what FHIR says, the data type can be bound to a value set. You're bounding the URI to the code, and the code is a
Which is the thing
URI.
on the left. It's the thing on the left, not
That's
the
not what
middle.
it's. I'm sure
Yeah, it is.
I did this 3 days ago. I'm sure. Let me read the.
just throw us the
No.
reference, Angus.
Yeah, the thing is, like,
Here's the reference.
we have to have a code, right?
Yeah, you have
like
a code. It's
yeah,
a
and
data type
it's
string. It is a
yeah,
data type
and
string.
we're
Yeah,
managing this
yeah,
code
yeah.
system, so it's in our
URI.
system.
So the code field is not of data type URI. The code field is data type string. It is the system that is the data type URI. And what I'm objecting to, or what we're concerned about, I'm not even sure I'm really objecting to it, is that the code field has been filled with a URI, which theoretically you could turn a URI obviously into a string because it's just characters. But really, I think is kind of where we're going with that.
So,
But I
so the
guess
last link I gave you, is it? A few special cases,
Yeah, I'm not
human.
sure what that means.
The second, not the first one
Second one.
wasn't
Yeah,
helpful. This
yeah,
the
Okay.
second
yeah,
one,
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
and it says binding string values. A typical case where codes for
But it's
there
not
are
actually
several
binding a
places.
string value. That's actually separate. We've done that before in it's binding a codable data type, and the code is represented as the code is the string equivalent of a URI. This is weird. I've never seen it
No,
anywhere.
no, no. So there it says it in the last sentence.
Yeah,
The value property shall contain the code specified by the value set, and the system and display values are ignored.
but it's not actually binding a string value. It's binding a terminology. It is simply that parts of the terminology, so the sub-elements. Okay, we should
I just
probably
take
take
what
this
I.
offline and
There's
I'll go
one
through it with
paragraph which
you.
is quite clearly clear. I'm just quoting that paragraph.
Yeah, and I think you're wrong.
Well,
because
As
read
this
the
in, I
is
agree
paragraph.
with what the
used.
fire standard has said. And oh no, Brian, you go for it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is used for binding stuff, like this is said here, is for stuff like states or towns that are in a coded content. So you can bind it to stuff like address.city. And apparently it says it'll equally apply to URI,
URI. So a
which
code can
is,
be a
yeah, binding to
URI. It
code.
implies that your code can be a URI. I get all the performance issues you're going on about, but it
Yeah.
clearly states there the URI is bound to the code.
We're not
Yeah.
saying it's invalid fire. We would have objected to it before voting a lift and shift for that. Um, so I'm not saying it's not valid fire. It's just weird.
Yeah, yeah. I think the thing is, like, if you want it to be different, like, we need to make decisions about what to do, and yeah, and how to possibly explain. Like, I think the agency ones, there are definitions attached to those, and it's electronic health URIs, and that HL7, the HL7 one is actually referring to a spec, a specific spec. So it's yeah, but I'm happy. Like, if we wanted to
So I'd
change
like
it
to
to a
round
simpler
back
code,
to
that
Hang on.
makes no
say,
Can
difference
you
if it's
can
breaking, right? Yeah.
can you scroll down to the other examples further down, which you've got other interesting things? So these URI ones, while they're not as long, they seem to be a similar sort of strange thing to the URI ones.
Yeah, like if we had a code system for each, like we actually had a code system and a code, right, for each of those that was specific to the owner of the reference. Like these are RG codes, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, like, but we don't have anyone managing that. So like we have to use our system, our code system is defining those terms.
Yeah.
But we can put what we like in there if we want to refer to agency things or HL7 version 2 specs. We could just allocate a code and say that's what it is. Yeah.
I'd want to have a good reason to change the existing code to something else, and
Yeah.
just which intentionally breaks if there's not a good reason to intentionally break.
so I guess I'll come back to
Yeah.
what I was trying to drive towards, which wasn't actually changing the codes, even though I got sucked down that rabbit hole. What I was trying to say is HL7AU has a namespace register. If we're formatting like URIs, can we not actually look at registering
Yeah.
or at
I can take
least
those as
having
action.
documentation around
Yeah. Yeah.
ns.hl7.org.au?
Yeah.
That's all I was
I'll
thinking that we
take,
should do.
yeah, I can take that as an action because I suspect there actually are pages, but they're not resolving at the moment. I'll go and check. Because I think we set up supporting pages for those, but I'm not sure they're available right now. So I can take that as an action to go investigate.
Thanks, Brett. So basically, I believe there's some actions to do. I believe I will defer to the next meeting.
Yeah, so I think
Yeah.
I guess the question is how do we get this to AFMM1
Yeah.
by the
Well,
next
it needs to
meeting?
be merged into master.
Yeah,
And
cool. Yeah.
nothing that we've raised today was countermands the previous workgroup decisions.
Yeah.
Could you just pop back, Uday, to the QA.html? Is there anything there that we really have to worry about?
Yeah. I think there's still some QA work. The OIDs we know about. There's some URL, maybe special URL requirements that have not been done yet. So that would have to be fixed before merging. But I think we would leave the OID error until we go to FMM1.
No, the OID is the OID is not a problem. That's an
Yep.
expectation of the process that we have agreed at the firework group that OIDs are only assigned at the point at which we agree something is AFMM1. So that would be
Yeah.
I suppose we could call it conditional approval, but it is an expected approval at least.
Yeah, because I mean we wouldn't if we were to go to ballot and it was still a draft, we wouldn't include this at all. So it wouldn't be an error anymore. Um but I think there's some special URLs there which is editorial that have not
Yeah,
been done. So yeah.
I'm not worried about that. The URL mismatch
Uh
is not an issue.
I think
What's
yeah,
the first one?
there was an example,
That's an example. Yeah, I'll just scroll through that.
yeah, there was an example error as well, which I have just fixed. I hope. Maybe it's gone already.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's gone, I believe. Yeah, this is the
Yeah.
direct build of
Yeah.
that branch. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have the count of, sorry, so yeah, it
Yeah.
was 12 before,
So
it's
it's
11 now. Yeah.
yeah, and I think there was the value set. Did they have any errors?
The value. This is the codes. I think
The code
6,
systems.
7. Yeah.
There's a value set. Yeah. So I think that's annoyed. They're just annoyed ones as well. So
Yeah.
that's understood.
Does it actually say pinned the version?
Yeah, we'd have to.
Oh no, that's just an
Yeah,
update.
it's
Sorry, in ID
chosen. Yeah.
publishers messaging.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
actually okay, sorry. Yep, no,
Yeah.
I'm
It's telling you
fine.
what it's chosen. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, those are
Yeah.
fine.
Cool.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think scope-wise, this has covered all the requested material, and I think it's sufficient to use for base, especially.
So in that case, we can pass the motion. Brett, or would you like?
No, we can't.
Let's
Like
go
we
to
actually
let's
can't
merge it.
approve
Yeah.
AFMM1 in this meeting.
So so let's go to cleaning up all the QA that we have, anything remaining, get it merged, and then raise some tickets for FMM1 for next meeting.
Okay.
So Uday, that's on you.
Okay.
Raise a ticket. I'll handle the merge.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll discuss with you offline. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
No worries.
Yeah,
Thanks.
cool. Catch you later. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Uday. Okay, so that we only have 7 minutes left. I'm going to go back to the agenda. So we had Brett's family member history, which I think we had deferred anyway.
Yeah.
So it was just the one that we had outstanding from Angus.
Not a chance in 7 minutes.
Oh no, I'm saying, okay, what do we do with it then? Do we
Can you tell us
again
what
deal
it
with
is?
this through ballot or?
Can you
Yeah,
give us
is
the
there
5 minute?
Yeah,
5 minute
I can
overview?
give
Yeah,
I can give you the I
1
can
minute
even show
spiel.
yeah, I can even show a diagram for you because I made one. So
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
yeah. Share. Yeah. What's this chat here? See this diagram? Yes.
Mm.
So it's to do with the back on. It's to do with these identifiers, right? So and we're talking about on diagnostic report, right? So we have all the identifiers. We have all these identifiers that you could use on diagnostic report. So I'll show you the resource, AU Base, isn't it? Diagnostic report, pathology. We're talking about these identifiers here, right? And in my view, they're all overlapping and very confused, right? You have, if we start, like, of course, identifiers is just generic, but if you start with it's these three, right? So local order identifier, if you drill into it, it's a a local order identifier, and it comes in different variants, right? This type here, you've got these types: fill a group number, fill a number, place a group number, place a number, right? 4 variants. So the 2 for the filler, 2 for the placer, one's a grouper, and one's the individual, right? You go back, then you've got local order identifier, and it uses LRI, and it talks in a very generic sense, the identifier profile for a local report identifier. And then it has this thing that kind of leads you off going, no, actually, you're meant to use the ones we just looked at. Oh, but sometimes you might use this accession number, which is another one. And go back. And then here's the accession number that was referring to. And the accession number one has 2 types here, basically a radiology accession number and laboratory accession number. But they're all on diagnostic report. And in my view, they're all very confused about the identifiers, which for me, it's this simple pattern, right? Placer systems have a grouper number and a placer number. Filler systems have a filler group number and a filler order number. In sampling and PACS systems, we have accession numbers and series or sample IDs. They're the 6 identifiers that are used, and yet, and this is where we won't have the time, these ones make sense. They line up perfectly. That one lines up perfectly. This one, these ones should line up to accession number as like specimen accession number or image study identifier, which is an accession number. And then if I turn that off, the next ones are fine. This is the series and sample ID, which line up to the identifier or the series number. And then if we go down, this is where it gets messy. So for group filler number, we've got 3 concepts, right? They talk about using this one, but maybe you'll use this one, or maybe you use that one, depending if you're pathology or radiology. So which one is it? Do I use FGN for pathology, or do I use ALAC-C? And for radiology, do I use FGN or do I use ACSN? And then the next one's also confused. This one says, oh, you go to this LRI, but then this advice says, oh, but you might use this fill, or you might use these 2. It's like, hang on, but didn't we use these 2 for the other concept here? And in my view, it should look like this, right? Like it should be just simple. Like this is a filler group number, this is a filler group number. What people call them, just because Epic and some people call their filler group numbers accession numbers, has got nothing to do with being interoperable, right? It's just what they call it, right? That they get confused between, are they talking about a sample report for a sample, or are they talking about a report? But we've just dragged their terminology into the spec, and they got very confused. And I'll stop there because we haven't got enough time.
That's good. So can we raise tickets like with specific asks? Like, should some of these go away?
Breakup
Should some of them?
needs clear.
Yeah.
Part of
we
that
need
is because this is base, which is definitional, not like here's
Yeah.
how you're actually supposed to use all of these things, though I know we blur that line in base. Um, and there are reasons why this kind of happened. Well, actually, I guess not kinda, it happened. There are
Yeah.
reasons why it happened, and I think there's this play across base, core, and what I think the e-requesting work group has a reporting spec that's being worked on or is planned to be worked on that I think that it would be really good if we started discussing this. Um, but I don't know that we could be confident to just like, are you actually, sorry, Angus, play out of this is, are you suggesting we deprecate some of the existing identifier profiles? Or is it more that we just remove some of them off the list of options in existing like base profiles?
Yeah, I'm really just trying to point out the problem that it's very confusing as to what anyone would do. The answers to that, like, sure, it's simple to just say delete those ones and do this, but I understand that that has ramifications. If anything, maybe advice in these things,
Yeah.
I don't think I think we completely put these ACSN and lands numbers in the wrong spot. They should be they're this thing, right? But so I think it needs discussion. I think it needs. I can point out that this is just a mess, right? Like, how would anyone know what to do? And then it's going to need discussion and about how do we fix it. I mean, I can see how you could just fix it, but the change management of fixing it will be problematic in itself.
Are you
I
up
think
for a
Okay.
breakout? And I
yeah.
will also then say B, part of this is actually kind of like workflow and actually like agreeing on how all of that works. And I know you guys have a
Yeah.
project, so I'm kind of thinking that maybe that's actually up to that project to like really like figure it out. And
Well,
it like comes back up where then like core and base like reflect the decisions that were made in like the reporting project rather
yeah.
than
I mean,
the
it's I'm only sort of pushing the barrier now because we've got AU core defining a diagnostic report, and then we're lifting the lid on AU base because of some of that work. And so, foundational wise, it has to change at base, right? But I accept that, reporting when we get going is probably where the discussion's probably more valid, and we have to roll it all the way back to base, all the way up through core. What we're doing in AU core now is further locking in what's in AU base today.
If
That's my concern.
sort of, I mean, we just inherit from base, so core doesn't care about any
True,
of these identifiers in particular. Base changes, core changes. So
true.
I don't think I'm not that particularly worried about it. Although I can see that, could we, like, can we have, because it's still ballot period. Are you coming to the Brisbane Connectathon? Can we do another breakout around this and
I am
try to
coming
play
to
out
the
what
Brisbane.
that is?
Yep, that's fine. Yeah, I'm coming to Brisbane Cake now.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll
Then
be
let's try
there.
to go for two. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good because if we can come to at least, if there's specific advice to give or there's changes to the profile needed, we can, come to a conclusion and then do it after in reconciliation.
Yeah,
You can,
and it definitely
yeah,
needs the Epic guys because it's the
yeah,
American systems that distort this, right? And they don't distort the concepts; they distort the names. They like to call their lab numbers accession numbers, but they're not. What they're talking about is a group of samples which they produce a report from. So we need one language for FHIR, like, one set name for each thing, not we just pile in every industry's term and create a new identifier for it because they said we call it this and they call it Fred and they call it Bob. And then we've gone and made profiles for Fred, Bob, and Jane because they all said that's what they call it, but no one identified that they're all talking about the same thing. Anyway, yep, we'll kick it down to the connectathon. We can discuss
thanks,
that.
Angus.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. We are 3 minutes over. So we will finish up our meeting and see you all in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks, Jay.
You.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right.